Good afternoon. This is Paul DeWitt, member of the Nashville Bar Association Historical Committee. One of our key projects is to do interviews and conduct oral histories of prominent Nashville attorneys and judges. And I am very pleased today to interview Mark Beveridge, longtime member of the Nashville Bar, recently retired. We're just going to discuss his life and his career as an attorney and touch on a number of different topics today. Today is Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, and we are conducting this interview in the offices of the Nashville Bar Association. And we want to thank them for affording us an opportunity to use their facilities for this. So without further ado, could you please state your name, sir,
Mark Stockton Beveridge,
and your date of birth?
July 4, 1954.
All right. Mark, you have lived in Nashville most, though not all of your life. I believe you were born in Nashville. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your grandparents and parents, a little bit just about their backgrounds. And I believe neither of your parents were from Nashville originally, and just kind of walk us through how they came to Nashville.
Okay. My mother was a lady named Reed Munson Beveridge. She was from a little town called Connellsville, Pennsylvania, just south of Pittsburgh. And my father was a gentleman named John Harmon Beveridge. He was from a little town just west of the Shenandoah Valley in the mountains of Virginia. The town was Monterey, Virginia. They met when she went to Mary Baldwin College in Stanton, Virginia. And my father went to the University of Virginia, both undergraduate and medical school. I think they met. Somebody set them up on a blind date, and so they met and married. I want to say just about the time the World War II started. May have been that December, but they married. My father was in the service. He was the chief post surgeon at Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia
During the Second World War.
during the Second World War. So they lived various places. And after the war, he'd already had some medical training, medical school, I guess, and it was time for him to do his residency. And I think he came to Nashville to do a residency here at the VA hospital. And it was in radiology.
This would have been right after
World War II in 45, 46, 47, somewhere in that period.
Before we go forward, I want to go back for a minute. I believe on your mother's side, you had a prominent Civil War soldier and veteran. Tell us about
so on my mother's side, her great uncle, I believe it was a man named John Danks, who was a major in the Union Army. And interestingly, on my father's side, we had some Confederate folks too. And I remember of course, we settled in Nashville, and I remember as a young person, I was frankly kind of embarrassed that I had been brainwashed to think that the Confederacy was better. And I was like, and my mother I remember we'd drive to Florida and we'd see the red clay, and she'd say, "That's Yankee blood," and I think I believed it. I don't know, but only later did I learn that, because I always thought that my Union ancestor was not anybody significant. Later, I learned he was a major, and his name's on the Pennsylvania Monument at Gettysburg.
Oh, wow.
He
So
fought
he fought it probably
battles.
a lot of battles.
He did. So I'm very proud of him now. I'm like, I've actually got his Masonic pin. And so now he wasn't my great great grandfather. I think he was my great uncle.
Okay.
So I'm right about that.
Okay. But briefly staying on where we were. Your mother from Connellsville, Pennsylvania, and your father from Monterey, Virginia. Were their parents still living when you were growing up?
My mother's mother was alive. My other grandparents were all deceased by the time I was born, but my grandmother from Pennsylvania used to ride the train down to Pittsburgh. I can remember, going to pick her up at Union Station. She'd have ridden down, and she was a sweet lady and a wonderful person.
days gone by when Nashville had passenger rail service.
You know, the funny thing is the street that we used looked about like it does now, even back then in the early sixties. I mean, basically we came down Harding Road, which turned into West End, which turned into Broadway, and it was still just about the same number of lanes. It's kind of amazing. It's never, never really changed.
All right, so you were born in the 4th of July of 54 in
Yeah.
Nashville.
Correct.
And you, I believe, were the third of 3 children.
That's right. I have 2 older sisters, Anna and Cindy.
All right. And grew up, as you say, out in the West Nashville area.
Right. I grew up in Hillwood, not far from Hillwood Country Club. In fact, I think our house was maybe the second house in Hillwood. My father used to tell me that when they bought the lot, one of H.G. Hill's men they were starting to develop that land, and
Mr. Hill.
Yeah, and one of his, I guess somebody in his real estate people group met my father over at a lot, and there was a lot across the street. The one he ultimately bought, kind of down lower, and my father was looking at that. That's the one that was for sale. And my father looked up the hill and he said, "Well, what about that lot up there?" And it was on Donna Springs Road, which hadn't been formed yet. And the gentleman said, "Well, I don't think that was for sale." And my father said, "Would you ask Mr. Hill if he'd sell it to me?" So he sold it to him. That's where I was born and raised. I think our house may have been the first house in residential home that had central air conditioning.
Oh, wow.
That's what my dad told me. In fact, I think his medical partners, when he put it in, told him, "You know, you're gonna go broke trying to air condition your house." But so.
And you lived in that house all growing up?
I did. Moved in. They built it in 1954. I guess it was ready when I was born in July. So.
Now, your father was a radiologist, and he had a practice in Nashville for many years.
He practiced with, well, I guess it was originally McClure, Lanier, Ivy, and Beveridge. They asked him to come to work with them, and so that's what it became. And then it morphed into so many other radiologists joined them, and they finally stopped including everybody's name. They just called it Radiology Associates, I think.
One of the names you mentioned was Ivy. I believe there was
yes.
a Dr. Ivy who lived over on Linwood.
Yes.
You remember having Christmas
well.
parties he hosted there?
Very much so. Fortunately, I have the good fortune to live in Dr. Ivy's house. But, Dr. and Mrs. Ivy lived on Linwood Terrace, and they would have our family over to their house on Christmas Eve every year, and even before I was born. In fact, the December before I was born in July, my mother knew she was pregnant. My father wore a tie with a stork on it, and that's how he kind of let his partner Joe know he's going to be having a kid.
Clever way to make.
So there you go. So, for as long as I could remember, we'd go over there every Christmas Eve for Christmas, and it was always great fun. It was very old-fashioned and traditional,
So you had fond memories of that party in that house, and then years later, by good fortune, you were able to buy that.
It came on the market, and my wife and I went and looked at it, and of course I walked in, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is like the world's greatest house." I loved it. And we put an offer down, which was way, way inadequate. And so that we just sort of walked away, although I must say, every time I kind of drive by and look up, and there'd be a car parked, and I still kind of thought, "Well, wouldn't that have been a great place to live?" But months later, Dr. Ivy's real estate agent called, and she said, if you're still interested, he'd like to try to see if he can sell it to you. You'll have to come up, and he'll come down. So we worked it out, and ended up buying it, and I was so.
What year did y'all buy that house?
1996.
So you've lived there 28 years.
Yeah, and I was so gratified to have gotten it. I thought, I'm going to go see Dr. Ivy, who was still living there. He was moving out, and I took him a bottle of scotch because I know he liked scotch. And he said, "Mark, I'm really glad I'm selling it to you, but I must say, for the amount you're paying, I should be buying you a bottle of scotch." It's just a very
it's a wonderful house. I had the good pleasure of meeting with Mark recently there. It's a wonderful house. All right, let's move forward though. You grew up in Hillwood and attended, I guess, schools in that area growing up. To just kind of walk us through your elementary education
Okay.
first.
I actually was in the first kindergarten class at Ensworth School. And so I went there from kindergarten through sixth grade and started MBA, Montgomery Bell Academy. In the
Okay,
seventh grade.
still on Ensworth though, you
Yep.
were in the first class.
First kindergarten class.
Okay.
I think it had opened a few years early, but they hadn't had a
Okay.
kindergarten class.
And that's that is not the high school where we now know it to be out on Highway.
Yeah, it was on Woodlawn.
On Woodlawn.
It's
And
still is.
if I'm not mistaken, that house had been that of Nashville attorney Jack Norman.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes, that was Jack Norman's house, and I guess he sold it to whatever group was forming Ensworth School in the late 50s.
Wow.
In fact,
Okay.
just as an aside, some of the Nashville Bar Association picnics, summer picnics in the 50s were held there.
Is that right? Wow.
I know that from my father who attended some.
Oh, wow. Well, it was a great school.
Yes.
I had a fabulous class, and I still keep up with, many of my classmates. One of my classmates was my next door neighbor, Rip Trammell. We were
Yes.
best friends, and but so many buddies still came out of that class.
All right. So you went through kindergarten through, I guess, sixth grade at Ensworth.
Right.
And formed a lot of lifelong friendships
Right.
there.
Right.
And then come seventh grade is you enroll at MBA, Montgomery Bell Academy.
Correct.
Nearby.
Right.
Then is now on West End Avenue. And you were there, I believe, 3 years.
Right. Right.
And then for whatever reason, decided to leave there and transfer to military academy.
That's right. I went to MBA. I was a good kid, and I wasn't a problem person, but I was not very mature, and so I didn't study all that well. And I was finding myself in summer school, and so I wasn't like I said, I wasn't a bad kid, but I didn't study. I was one of those kids that when we start talking about the test tomorrow, my friends would say, "Well, I'm not even going to study for that." And I'd go, "Well, I'm not going to study either." And so I wouldn't study at all. And they would study enough to get a C or whatever. And I didn't do anything. So I just needed to kind of grow up a little bit. And my parents, having had that connection in Stanton where my mother went to Mary Baldwin and my father's homestead was near there, said, how about we take a look at that school? I mean, I could have gone to other schools,
Yeah.
UGA, could have repeated at MBA probably, and or Hillwood, but probably the first mature decision I ever made. I went and looked at it. I thought this would probably be good for me, and so I went up there and I realized that if I studied 2 hours a night, I would be an A+ student, and of course I got to repeat, so I'd probably taken algebra and Latin for the second time. So everybody thought I was a genius up there. It was pretty fun.
And just to be clear, it is pronounced Stanton.
Well, it depends on who you ask.
Okay.
Some people call it Stanton.
How is it spelled?
Staunton.
Okay, so it would appear to be pronounced Staunton.
Staunton, but
some
maybe others. I've always called
Okay.
it Stanton. It was a very prominent military school. Barry Goldwater went there. John Dean, you've probably heard of.
Yeah.
So in its day, it was a great school, including when I was there.
Were you at all homesick when you got there, or did you adjust to it pretty quickly right off the bat?
Well, it's an adjustment no matter.
Yeah.
But I'd been away to summer camp when I was maybe in the 4th or 5th grade. I was very homesick then. And so I kind of had that experience. And I knew when I started, this wasn't going to be a bed of roses to start. So, whatever, I sucked it up and applied myself and stayed out of trouble. And the next thing you know, I was kind of rising up the ranks and did well there.
And I believe you were president of the student council?
Yeah, I was president of the senior class, editor of the newspaper, and
wow,
captain in the Corps. So I mean, I did well. As I said, I learned that you did applied yourself and studied and kept your shoes shining and did what people said. You could succeed, or at least I could.
Okay, just as an aside, but this would have been the early 70s, and I guess
69 to 73.
okay, the Vietnam War was still going on. Did you ever were you ever concerned that you might have to enroll, or was there any uh, program that would have led to you enlisting or being, if not being drafted, or was that
Well,
not
I was,
concerned to
of course,
you?
it was a junior ROTC program there at that
Uh-huh.
school, and I did well. And, you know, I was approached by the folks at the school to see if I might be interested in an appointment to a military school.
Mhm.
And that was, you know, gratifying. But it was during the period of Vietnam, and you know, I just thought, no, I probably want a civilian life. And, you know, Vietnam was ending. I did get a lottery number, and my lottery number by that time, I think it was like in the 200s. So I probably wouldn't have gone anyhow. But by that time, seemed like the last time they called people up was in 72, maybe.
Yes.
And I graduated in 73. So
Yes.
I was never really threatened with going to
Yes.
Vietnam.
Well, I know because I was graduating from high school in 73, and the draft was ended in January of 73. So
Okay.
there was some considerable relief about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. So you graduated from Staunton
Mhm.
Stanton in 73
Correct.
and went into University of Virginia
right,
in
yeah.
Charlottesville.
That's true.
Tremendous academic institution then as now. How did you decide on that? Did you consider other?
I did. I was a bit kind of was Vanderbilt, Carolina, or Virginia. I was accepted at all of them. My father had been to UVA, and you know, I sort of had been every time we kind of get near Charlottesville, when as a boy, we might stop in. So, and I've always loved history, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, you know, the colonial guys. So I knew that if I was accepted to UVA, I would go there. And I was accepted.
And you
never any doubt.
Enrolled there, I guess, in the fall of 73.
That's
and
true.
Graduated, I guess, 4 years later.
In May of 77.
All right. Yeah. And from there, you decided to apply to law school.
Ended up going to the University of Richmond in Richmond, Virginia.
In Richmond.
I had a lot of friends from Virginia, and thought for a time I might settle in Virginia. And so that's why.
When did you kind of develop or make a decision towards law, or when did you decide you wanted to go to law school? Did you kind of know that all along, or did it kind of pop up close to the end of your college days, or how?
You know, it's funny. As a son of a doctor, I think I always thought I would probably be a doctor. That somehow I would be anointed to be a doctor. In fact, somebody ever got hurt in the backyard, they'd say, "Get Beveridge over here, take a look at it. He can fix it. His father's a doctor." So I just sort of thought I'd be a doctor.
Yeah.
And so that's what I went to. If to the extent I thought about it, when I went to Virginia, I thought, well, maybe I'll go pre-med. So I went to a big chemistry class that had probably 400, 500 people in it, stadium seating, and I got there kind of late, and I'm looking down at all the people around me, and I'm going, nah, I don't think this is going to happen. So pretty quickly, I was like, you know, science isn't I can handle science, but it doesn't really light my fire. And
it sounds like history was more.
History was my calling, in English and things like that. So I was a history major. And then so you're thinking, what are you going to do with a history major?
Yeah.
Well, I had an uncle on my father's side that was a judge, an uncle on my mother's side that was a judge.
Okay.
Again, all these prominent people in history like Jefferson and Lincoln that I had admired that were lawyers. And I thought, well, that sounded like a good thing. And they used to say, even if you don't practice law, it'll be a good, good education to have. So I had to do something after graduating, and I did the old law school.
It was a very familiar career.
Probably not alone in what was happening.
I majored in history at UNC, and but I never seriously considered medicine. But so growing up in Nashville, were your parents friends of lawyers? Did you know any lawyers really very well?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And were any of the lawyers that maybe of your parents' generation influential on you?
Well, just from our church. I mean, I certainly knew of your father,
Westminster Presbyterian Church,
and my parents had many lawyer friends. Joe Cummings, Vance Berry, Woody Sims. for me personally, probably other than family, those judges that I mentioned that were my uncles, the man that stood out to me was a man named Henry Goodpasture.
Henry Goodpasture,
who
yes.
sort of was part of the founding of Westminster Presbyterian
Yes.
Church. He sat one pew ahead of us in church, and he taught an adult education, adult Sunday school class, and my mother was in, and my father, when he attended, would attend. But every time he'd come into church, he'd turn around in his silver seersucker suit with his beautiful silver hair, and he'd say, "How you doing today, young fella?" And then he'd take me out to his farm, Old Town.
Yes, out in Williamson County.
Yeah, I'd go out there, we'd look for arrowheads, and the family would go out there and swim on Sundays in their cement pond. There weren't many pools back then, but so he's a gentleman that I knew he was a lawyer. He's probably he had a firm, Goodpasture Carpenter Woods.
He later Goodpasture Carpenter Sasser and Wood,
Okay.
I think.
All
yes, but yes.
So he was a lawyer. I bet he was a little, what we'd almost call a gentleman.
Yes.
Lawyer farmer, because he had that farm to attend to at Old Town. So I just had tremendous admiration for him.
Yes.
And to me, I thought that man is real class, and I wouldn't mind having a career like him.
Just as an aside, he was from the small town of Minville, Tennessee, which was also the hometown of my grandmother, my father's mother, and the two of them grew up together in McMinnville. And my grandmother would tell the occasional story about when Henry would chauffeur her around town, and he had the first car in McMinnville. This would have been about 1920 or so. But
and his wife, Virginia.
Yes.
I'd go out there and she'd bring cookies and grape juice in a silver pitcher. But to kind of give you an idea how much I liked Henry Goodpasture, the first pet I ever had was a little chick that I got at a Easter party, and I named him Henry. And my last child is a young man named Henry Beveridge.
Oh, so, I knew you had a son named Henry.
And he's named, that's not a family name for us, but it's just a name I've always, loved. And I guess it comes back to my respect for Mr. Goodpasture.
Yes.
Mr. Goodpasture was the assisting elder when Henry was baptized.
Is that right?
So he was a good man.
A great man, yes. I think he lived over on Fairfax.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Well, somewhere over.
Okay, I may be thinking of, there was another.
He lived off West End. After he moved from Old Town, when he and Miss Virginia got older, they moved, I think it was to a little place off of West End, and then eventually they moved into Park Manor, and I went to visit him there.
Yes.
My law firm eventually was right in front of Park Manor.
All right. Well, back to your own early days.
Yes.
So you graduated in less than 3 years from University of Richmond Law School.
I graduated in 2.5.
Okay.
Not that I was, I did well there, but I just really was sort of tired of school and ready to get to work, to be honest with you.
Did you, during law school, know what kind of law you wanted to practice?
Not really. I just wanted to get a good job. And I thought my mind was wide. I could tell you the things that I probably wouldn't do. I mean, I wasn't going to be a real estate lawyer. Not that that's not a great career, but there are just some things but whether it would be courthouse lawyer, courtroom lawyer, corporate lawyer, I didn't really know. I just wanted a good law job.
And I believe you got out of law school maybe in December.
Yeah.
And came to Nashville and maybe applied or interviewed with several law firms, and eventually you happened to meet with District Attorney Tom Shriver. Tell us about your meeting with him and how that developed into your first job.
What happened is, I was graduating, and so I sort of sent letters out to law firms in Nashville, probably at the end of November of, I guess that would have been 79. And I didn't immediately get responses, but I, did get one, I think, from Shriver's office. At any rate, when I came home for Christmas, I went and met with Tom Shriver down at the courthouse.
His office, the district attorney's office at that time, was in the Metro courthouse.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. And you know, we had a great conversation. I thought, wow, what a nice man. And
Did you already know him at all?
I did not know him. No, no. But I knew of him.
Yeah.
You know, he had a good reputation.
Yes.
And my former brother-in-law was a man named Johnny Harwell. And I think Johnny played in a band that had been called the Outbound Freight that Tom had played the mandolin in.
Yes.
And at any rate, he may even have given me an introduction, but I went and met with Shriver that over Christmas that year, because my plan at that point had been, you know, take the Virginia bar in February and then take the Tennessee bar in July. And as I'm meeting with Shriver, we're talking, and he says, well, I've got an opening and I'll get it to you. He said, but I don't see why you need to wait until July. Why don't you go on and just take the Tennessee bar in February? And while you wait for the results, you can come on and start working for me. And once you get your license, you know, you can start going in court and doing stuff. And so all of this, I'm like, well, that makes tons of sense. So
That was this all at the very first and
I
only
kinda think
meeting?
I
You didn't
think
have like a follow-up?
I can't remember. It may have all been in that first meeting or a follow-up phone call. I don't remember going down there twice. So I might have talked to him, but you know, we just hit it off.
Yeah.
And he gave me a great opportunity. And I thought to myself, well, that sounds good. I'm going to learn.
You had
a
never
lot.
thought about being a
I
prosecutor
just, no, not really.
or criminal law,
I
maybe.
hadn't, but I thought this will be fantastic experience as I'll find out if I want to be a courtroom lawyer and if I'm any good at it. And if not, I also thought, well, you know, some people go into politics and have this kind of job. I thought, for all I know, I might want to be a politician
Maybe
someday.
so.
So
you went ahead and took the
Took the
Tennessee bar exam
took the Tennessee
in
bar.
February of 1980. Okay. And got the results, good result back probably in April or May.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you were, I guess, sort of a clerk or
I was
intern.
doing some work at Shriver's office. I guess I don't know exactly what I was doing. So I was in the library doing a few things, but probably dissuade from my results.
We're talking about a much smaller district attorney's office, both physically and in terms of the number of staff than there is now.
There probably weren't more than
Probably
14 or 15.
14 or 15 assistant DAs.
At that time.
Very small support staff. Occupying part of the first and part of the second floor of the Metro Courthouse.
Right next to the Metro Legal Department on the second floor.
Shared a library with the Metro Legal Department.
Yeah, little library.
Just tell us about how, I believe that there was maybe one Xerox machine that maybe worked half the time.
That sounds about right. I mean, it was a smaller.
Pre-computers, there were everybody used typewriters.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. A time I was very familiar. I know that style better than some of the stuff we do now, to be totally honest with you.
All right. You get the good bar result back, I guess, in April, and you're now a lawyer. You're licensed to practice law, and you go to court.
So Shriver,
how did that play out?
You know, I think I said to General Shriver, I said, what do I need to do to get ready for this job? He said, well, I'm going to give you a volume 7 and a volume 7A of the Tennessee Code that contains all the criminal laws and the criminal procedure. Look over those things and we'll get started. So I did that, and then he said, I want you to follow along one of the lawyers that's going to General Sessions Court. I did that for about 2 weeks and sort of was an observer, kind of going with him, sitting next to him. And I say him because I don't think there were any women in General Sessions Court right then. Mary Houseman was there, but I'm not sure she was doing that. But at any rate, so I did that, and after 2 weeks, he said, all right, you're ready, let's go. So I get a docket of 4, 5, 6 pages in General Sessions Court. And I get put on a team that rotates, which I think you probably will eventually after you join the office.
Yes, just for the record, I joined the DA's office 2 years later in '82.
So there were probably 5 or 6 lawyers of us that rotated through 3 General Sessions criminal division courts and 1 jail docket.
Yes.
Those were called the bond docket. And then one was the jail docket.
Just to be clear, the defendants who could not post bond were put on a docket down at the jail called the jail docket, then is now. And those who did make bond were put on one of the bond dockets, of which there were, I guess, 3 at that time.
There was one at 9 a.m., one at 1 p.m., and one at 1:30.
Yes.
And then the jail docket, I think, started at 11:30.
And where was the jail docket held?
It was in the old H.G. Hill building.
Yeah, down on Second Avenue.
Second Avenue, and is that Gate Street
I
maybe
believe
down
so,
there?
yes.
I can remember walking down there in the sunshine and just, I loved the job, to be
Yeah.
totally honest with you. It was, you know, maybe people look back fondly on their early part of their careers, like, you know, these men and women that were in the military. But to me, it was just.
It was
fantastic.
totally different from
was
anything
fun.
you've ever done.
Oh,
But
I had all this
every day there were new.
authority, and
Yeah.
I had a job, and I was getting a paycheck. I mean, all the jobs I'd ever had had been summer jobs, and so I felt like a grown-up. I had gone to Brooks Brothers beforehand, I got a couple of suits.
Yeah.
Had some nice shoes, and so I just was having a blast.
And getting to know lots of judges and
Very
defense
much.
attorneys and
Very
just-
much stretching my boundaries. I
Yes.
mean, I was a kid that grew up in, 37205, I guess you'd say. So here I am now, meeting all of these interesting people, doing really fun work with characters and people that do. It's just
getting to know
phenomenal.
the judge, the court officers, the sheriff's personnel, the clerks, and all those people.
It was
And you
fun.
quickly learn that you better develop good relationships
Oh,
with
yeah.
these people because they
Oh,
could
yeah.
make your life pretty miserable.
Yeah.
If
I
you
liked
just-
them
Yeah.
across the board. I would have to say I enjoyed pretty much everybody that I encountered.
All right. Do you happen to remember what your beginning salary was there at the DA's office?
Around 20, I want to say, maybe 21. I remember thinking that's a really good salary, even compared to what the prominent law firms were paying. It was close to what they were making.
Really? So
It was a good salary for the time.
you were making a good salary, and your daily routine would be to come and probably go to court, either
Yeah.
to do a bond docket or jail docket.
So the afternoon before, I was in court that week, I'd go to court in the morning, and then that afternoon, I'd go to the clerk's office.
Oh, yes.
Pull all the warrants for the next day, and I'd read the warrants.
Yeah.
Get a copy of the docket, make little notes on there so I'd know what each case was about.
Yeah.
And then I'd get to court, half an hour earlier, and people would just start lining up and come talk to me. The police officers, and then the victims, and then the defense lawyers would all.
Yeah.
So it was just
It hadn't changed.
I felt real important, and
It's still the same way now.
Yeah.
You'd be amazed how little that's changed.
yeah. So then
Except you can read the warrants online now. You don't have to
Okay.
go up to the clerk's office
Okay.
to read them, but
So then we would have, the judge would come in, and they'd take another little break, and we'd work out plea bargains, the ones that we're gonna do, and then he or she would come back in, and we'd have the trials and the dispositions of the cases we settled.
all right. And of course, you, as most young assistant DAs do, eventually start going up to criminal court for felony jury trials and for
Right.
felony. So, but your initial, year or two was in general sessions court, or did you go up to criminal court pretty quickly?
It was pretty quickly for DA office wise, but I've been there, so I guess I started in April of 80, and I don't know if it was that July or the following July. Shriver came to me one Friday afternoon. My office was right next to his. And maybe that's why he chose me. I don't know. But he comes to me and says, there's a career prosecutor course coming up that I think would be really good for you. Would you like to do that? And I said, yeah, it sounds good. It's a 3-week course in Houston. You stay at the University of Houston, and you work on your trial skills and all this stuff. And I said, sure. He said, well, great. He said, the bad news is you've got to go tomorrow. And so I think it starts Monday. So I had the weekend to kind of get ready to go, and I was like, okay, let's go. And so I had that under my belt. I've been in sessions for probably a year and a half or so. Before I actually got assigned to criminal court, they, there was a time when there was a backlog, and so they assigned some of the cases to circuit court judges.
Oh, yeah.
And so, one of the general sessions DAs, first jury trial experience I had was some of those circuit court cases were given to some of the general sessions lawyers. So, my first jury trial was before Joe Loser.
Judge Joe Loser,
yeah.
I believe judge of the Third Circuit.
Maybe? Not sure what it was.
Yeah.
I know the case was a person was charged with grand larceny of an automobile. I got a conviction for joyriding, which was a lesser included offense, but Jim Price, I think, represented the defendant. Yeah. But so I had a few of those cases. I had a murder case with Dan Garfinkel. I remember that we ended up resolving.
Dan Garfinkel, a legendary Nashville criminal defense lawyer.
Man. Great man. Well dressed.
Known for his splendorous, if that's the word, attire.
He was
good.
Yeah. So then I got assigned to criminal court.
But before we get to criminal court, when you were in general sessions, who were some of the general sessions judges?
Oh my gosh, okay, so
maybe Gail Robinson and
Gail Robinson, Judge Donald Washburn,
yes,
John Boone, Bob Murphy, Bob Sutton. It's hard to kind of. Then Randall Wyatt was in general sessions court when I started, and
you rotated in and out, so you might have one judge 1 week and another the next
all
week.
These judges.
So you were learning each judge's preferences, and
each one had a different style.
Yeah.
Judge Robinson, Gail would say, "General, you know what today is?" I'd say, "What day? What day is it, Judge?" He says, "It's getaway. It's Friday. It's getaway day. If you get this done today," she said, "they don't take those offers, so we'll just try."
Yeah.
So each one of them was kind of different.
And just a quick aside about Judge Robinson. We're just to be clear, we're talking about Gail Robinson Sr., father of Gail Robinson Jr., who's still a general sessions judge, also known as Big Gail. And I remember I was assigned his docket for an entire week early in my career. Apparently, he was not happy with how slowly I was getting back, to either try cases or announce settlements. So right after the first call of the docket, Judge Robinson, rather than leave the bench and allow me to negotiate, well, let's just start. Madam Clerk, call the first case on the docket. Well, Andrew Adams, call your first witness, General.
Oh, yeah.
And I hadn't even known if my witnesses were there.
So you learned,
Judge, I need a little time. Call your first witness, General. Right. That was his way of breaking me in and telling me to start moving along.
So you learned about the different styles of each judge, and frankly, the different styles of all of the criminal defense lawyers that you came up with that. And it was interesting, and it was great. I loved it. So I'd been there, and I guess it was I want to say 82. Well, Judge Wyatt, when I first went up there, I went up to Division II. John Draper, who I think had been on the bench since like the 1920s, was the judge. David Rabin and Bob Strong were the assistant DAs, and I got assigned up there.
And just to be clear, each court, each of the three criminal courts had assigned to it a team of DAs.
That's right. Who
would handle virtually all the cases.
Right.
Okay, so a team, say in Judge Draper's court, might have 3 DAs.
I think it's Rabin, Strong, and myself, and initially, and so I was up there, and then in 82, Judge Wyatt was elected the criminal court bench. He'd been in general sessions court, so he came to Division II and was the judge I had there for 2 or 3 years until I was made the team leader of Division I criminal court. So I moved over from Division II to Division I, and the judge there was Sterling Gray. And but I had many trials with Judge Wyatt. He's I had the greatest admiration for him.
Back then, there were only 3 criminal courts in Davidson County.
Right.
That would change, I think, in 1990 when the 4th criminal court. Now, of course, there's 6. But in the 80s, well, for the most part during the 80s, the three criminal court judges were Judge Gray in Division One, Judge White in Division Two, and then trial judge A.A. Birch in Division Three. That changed about 1987,
Okay.
but we'll get to that in a
Yeah.
minute. So you were trying cases in Judge White's court and Judge Gray's court.
That's right.
And probably tried a lot of murders and other serious
I
cases.
did. Yeah.
And learning a lot about the way trials are conducted and learning that sometimes you win cases you should lose and lose cases you could win.
Right.
Learning that you never know what a jury's going to do. And
For the most part, in the criminal world, as a prosecutor, you usually win.
yeah,
I mean, a loss in criminal court would be somebody that was charged with first-degree murder, and the jury came back and convicted of, say, manslaughter.
Mhm.
You would not, the
consider
defense
that a
attorney would
victory.
say that was a big
Yeah.
victory. So I don't remember, I'm trying to remember if I ever had a straight out not guilty. I don't remember that.
Oh, really?
I don't remember that, but it's possible. But I do remember certainly some lesser included offenses where I thought the person should have been convicted of first degree murder and that they got something less.
We're talking about being a DA in criminal courts, Division Two and Division One.
Okay. So, yeah, I started off with Judge Draper as the judge in Division Two, and then Judge Wyatt was elected in '82 to the criminal bench, came up there. I tried cases before him for a couple of years, and then I was reassigned to be team leader of Division One. Sterling Gray was a judge, and so he was the judge, and I tried cases there.
All right. And trying lots of violent murder, other violent
Everything,
crimes. Yeah.
everything from murders and rapes and armed robberies, and I was the lead state lawyer for the Rocky Top corruption thing that the prosecution there was on some of the Tennessee people.
I didn't even know that they were prosecuted.
We did. I mean, most of it was done. It ended up in federal court,
Yeah.
but I was sort of part of the team. In fact, my picture was on the cover of the New York Times Sunday edition.
Really?
Didn't have my name. It's
Is
just
that
me
right?
leaning over a table signing some paperwork, but I was like, I've been on the cover. Anyway, so all types of cases from, the smallest to the biggest, I guess you'd say, they'd gotten into criminal court.
All right. And of course, during that time period, you're getting to know a lot of prominent lawyers,
Right.
both in the DA's office and outside of it. A lot of ex-DAs had left the office and established very good careers as defense attorneys. And talk a little bit about some of the attorneys you admired or perhaps modeled yourself after or just looked up to.
Yeah, so I would say that one of the pluses of working in the DA's office and starting to practice there is you very quickly get to meet and come to know a lot of different lawyers. And so, some of them practice at the very highest level, others, maybe do some things that you wouldn't do, but it sort of helps you kind of see what works and what doesn't, and you get to know a wide swath of the bar. I would say that in terms of people that influenced me, I would have to start with Tom Shriver, with my first boss, who was awesome.
And let's just talk about him for a minute.
Okay.
He was elected district attorney at a very young age. I want to say he was about 32 or 34 when he was elected in 1966. He stayed district attorney for 21 years, and he established a level of high ethical standards that influenced everyone, I think, that practiced under him. And talk a little bit about how he influenced you and others.
He was very approachable, for starters. I mean, he could come to talk to him about anything, and he would drop what he was doing and talk to you about it. So he also gave us a tremendous amount of authority, but not too much. I mean, he didn't want us doing stupid stuff, but he
didn't try to micromanage how you were handling a case.
He let you handle the cases. I remember I was trying to a drug case where that involved a prominent union executive was the defendant. There were a couple of defendants. One of them was some local union executive, and in mid-trial, even before the trial, I think he said, I'm getting calls from people in organized labor. What are we doing? And I told him about the case. He said, well, full speed ahead. And so, no, it was not political in any way.
That's
and I think, as I read about district attorneys around the country, that just sometimes they use it as a sort of a springboard to something else, and they're political. He was completely non-political
and not vindictive against former political.
Very fair,
yeah,
incredibly fair.
Right.
But he gave us authority. He was approachable. He was honest.
Yes.
And as you say, he set a high ethical standard.
Yes.
And in fact, I think generally the people he hired were, good people.
Yes.
So when you ask me who were mentors, I would have to start with my colleagues in the DA's office, from Shriver to Torrey Johnson to David Rabin to Tom Thurman across the board.
Yes. So,
but in terms of others, just so
like name two or three defense lawyers who.
Well, I'm going to start with obviously people like Ed Yarborough and Joe Binkley and Charlie Ray and Lionel Perry.
Yes.
A lot of, but people that I faced kind of daily were the people from the Nashville Public Defender's Office.
Yes.
And Walt Kurtz
yes.
was the public defender, and he would actually handle cases himself.
Yes.
And so I'd go up against Walt or his incredible staff.
Yes.
Of Jim Weatherly, Rich McGee, and
Bill Purcell and
Carl Dean and Sue Ellen Wyman and Bob Tucker and Jim Weatherly. And it was an incredible team. So every day, whoever it was, you had a I've always thought it was not humorous, but people that thought that just because they had a public defender, they weren't getting the best representation. Right. Well,
they were often getting far better representation.
They got the best. I mean, they would get several lawyers who were totally committed to their case, and they would get an investigative staff versus maybe somebody that was getting paid that was so busy doing other things. And I thought that the best lawyering, other than, obviously there were a lot of good lawyers, but daily, the public defender's office under Walt and then Weatherly and then I guess Purcell and Carl was strong. And it was, they made us better.
Yes, and they made us do our work too. They didn't just, they would file motions and they would cite cases and they would make it difficult for DAs to just run out and get easy convictions. They would frequently even win motions that maybe another lawyer would not have fought as hard for them on, or not even filed.
I failed to mention Bill Shulman, who was also a public defender during this time. But speaking of motions, there was a lawyer named Ken Reese.
Yes.
I think went to work at maybe Neil and Arwell.
I think that's right.
But he started filing all these lengthy motions, and we're like, "What are you doing?" And he was wearing us out.
Yes.
So they gave great representation. Oh, and by the way, there wasn't hostility. I mean, we got along. I mean, in the heat of the moment, you might, get your face might get red, but we afterwards we might go to the Gerst house together. There was civility that was strong.
One thing that other lawyers I've interviewed for this have noted consistently is how much more of a sense of camaraderie existed then than maybe existed later on or now among the bar.
Well, certainly I fortunately, I've sort of throughout my practice, I've felt like I've gotten along well with my adversaries. I know sometimes people don't, but but I certainly in the criminal realm, we always got along.
Mm-hmm.
People did. I found that lawyers that were professional, usually experienced ones, were the ones that were the most agreeable and were not, didn't get angry. It's the younger ones, or maybe the ones that maybe are lacking in some confidence that aren't that way.
Well, I want to turn briefly to kind of one of the disappointing moments of practicing law in the criminal courts of Nashville in the 80s, and that was Judge Gray was found to have, I believe, taken bribes or been corrupt, and that affected you personally and professionally. You want to just talk about that for a second? That
Sure. I don't know that, I know Sterling was indicted.
he had been an assistant DA under
He was an
Shriver.
assistant DA, and I had never had a case with him as an assistant DA. I had observed him in court. He was a really strong trial lawyer
Yes.
with a great voice.
Yes.
He became a judge. He was a judge of Division One. You mentioned that, I don't know that he was ever convicted. I think he was indicted of some
Okay.
offenses, but he died before there was ever a trial.
Right. He
Unless-
committed
Could be a
suicide.
mistake, but I know he died before, shortly, while the case was pending. But at any rate, I was the team leader in that court,
And practicing, trying cases.
trying cases in front of him and supervising
Right.
the other cases.
So you
I
had to
daily
have
was with him.
a daily relationship.
I mean, every day I was up
Right.
there. We got along well. He treated me well. He worked us hard. We tried
Mhm.
cases into the night, and you weren't sloppy and you didn't slouch, but he was fair, and so I had a lot of respect for him. And but I, sort of came to know that the TBI was investigating him, and of course I was aware of this, and I remember the day that he was actually to be arrested. I want to say it was a Friday, and he actually called me that morning before court. Mark, I want to see you. Come up to court early. Maybe his secretary called me. He said, at any rate, Judge Gray wants to see you before court. Come on up here. And I remember thinking, okay, he knows that he's been indicted. Somehow the word has gotten out, and he's going to kind of confront me with this. And I mentioned it, if it was to Shriver or to Tory or maybe to both, but to somebody, and I
I
said,
think Shriver was still the district attorney then.
yeah, but, and I don't, for some reason I thought maybe that Tory was involved in it too. I don't know if he was part of the team.
Just for the record, the Tory Mark's referring to is Victor S. Johnson. Later, soon after this moment, we're getting ready to talk about. Tory was appointed district attorney by the governor.
At any rate,
Anyway,
whoever I talked to said, well, go on up there and, play dumb and see what he wants. So I go up there and said, Judge, you want to see me? And he pulls a present out for me. I had recently gotten married, and he gave me a wedding present, and it was wrapped. I think I even opened it there in front of me. It was a silver chafing dish or something, and I was like, oh my gosh, this gentleman, he's giving me a present, and I know what's getting ready to happen that afternoon.
and you don't know whether he knows anything or not at that moment.
No, I mean, he was certainly being
Yeah.
as nice as he could possibly be to me and giving me a wedding present. And I felt
Sure.
terrible about it. I also, I didn't like the fact that if he was guilty of what he was charged with, and I was certainly suspicious of that based upon some of the things that I'd seen and information that I had. So very deeply disappointing, because this is a man that I liked and respected and that I perceived had fallen. And he ends up, dying. And but that's what that was.
Unfortunate moment. So,
Yeah.
But you're still, I guess, he resigned from the bench immediately after he was indicted and arrested.
Okay.
Creating an opening that kind of created a domino effect. My recollection is when he resigned, the governor, who I believe would have been Governor Ned McWhorter,
That's right.
appointed Tom Shriver to be his replacement, which created an opening in the district attorney's office, leading to pretty quickly after that, the governor appointing Tory Johnson district attorney. All of this happening pretty quickly over a period of maybe a month at most. And I want to say that was in the fall of '87. I know that because I actually interviewed Tory Johnson a few years ago, and
Okay.
he
That
was
sounds
born
right.
in on December 1st, 1987.
So
So
Tory became my boss. I stayed
Yes.
as a team leader in Division One.
you did.
Tom Shriver, who had been my boss, was now my judge. And
Except he could not hear cases he could not hear criminal cases for a few months because he had signed all of the indictments. So my recollection is he and Judge Walter Kurtz, who was a civil Fifth Circuit Court judge, swapped with Judge Kurtz coming up to preside over the criminal caseload until such time as Judge Schreiber could come back. Isn't that correct?
That's true. I can't remember. Kurtz actually came up, or we went down.
Maybe so.
We may have gone down to Fifth Circuit, but he was the judge there.
Okay.
And
but in any event, you're still the team leader.
And we're trying many cases in front of Judge Kurtz and Schreiber. I remember, you're right, he would say, there aren't any criminal cases I can hear. Let's see. Somebody see if they've got any other cases in circuit court. I remember thinking, can you really handle a divorce case, a trial or whatever? But that didn't stop Tom.
No,
and but at any rate, yes. So I had a lot of trials with in cases with Walt Kurtz.
Yes,
who I, as you know, admired a great deal.
As many do. That's Walter Kurtz, who was elected public defender. Well, I think he had been at Legal Services and maybe started up the law clinic at University of Tennessee, but came to Nashville in the 70s. I think he was elected public defender in maybe 1976 or 78. And that's when he recruited many of these attorneys Mark's been talking about to his staff. And they were a stellar group of attorneys then, and still in many cases are now. But then he resigned his public defender position to run successfully for judge of Fifth Circuit Court. I think that was in 82, but just to clarify who Mark's talking about. So he was obviously an influence on you and many others.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He was a positive influence. And if I mentioned the public defenders, but there were many lawyers like Joe Binkley and Ed Yarborough and John Hollins and Lionel Barrett, Charlie Ray, folks like just a number of really top lawyers who I dealt with regularly. All had different styles, but all of them incredibly successful and good people too.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So you had been at the DA's office maybe 10 years, close to 10 years, and then it's time for you to maybe look at elsewhere, and just kind of tell us where that led you about 1990.
So I had been, I guess when I took the DA's office, I didn't really know what to expect. Probably in the back of my mind, I thought I'll stay here a few years and then I'll move on and do something else. I had people approach me while I was in the DA's office, and I considered their offers. One time I even accepted one. I think I told you about this, and they put my name on the letterhead. But I just still kind of in the back of my mind wanted to stay where I was. And at that time, Schreiber also said, I want you to now go up to criminal court. I don't want you to leave. So I ended up staying. So at any rate, I still had in my mind that I probably needed to go out and see what else is out there. And so I did. And I decided I wanted to try civil litigation. Initially, I did a few DUIs, but I went to work for a firm called Howell and Fisher. There's a gentleman named Doug Fisher who sometimes came to General Sessions Court that had befriended me, and had a lot of respect for him.
He had been an assistant DA many years before, by the way, I learned.
Yeah. But he took an interest in me too. And, and so we had a conversation, and he offered me a job to be his associate in his law firm. And
Morton Howell was his partner.
Morty Howell. Great staff over there. And
where was their office?
In the Court Square building, just catty corner to the courthouse. And so it was a great opportunity where I had decided I want to try civil litigation. He was like one of the foremost, civil litigators in town. Yes. And knew the rules of evidence and rules of civil procedure like the back of his hand. Yes. And
I think he taught at
National School of Law. He was on some committees that helped write things in the legislature. So he was very learned in the law. And he loved the law. Yes, he did. Literally in an old school way. And so he offered me a job, and I thought, boy, this will be a good way to learn this. And so I went to work for him. And I guess in 1990, and stayed there for until I want to say about December of 92, maybe. And we did mainly insurance defense, professional liability defense, and medical malpractice. And one of the cases that we'd had that I worked on was a case involving was a medical negligence case. It involved an outpatient surgery center where a little girl had bled to death, and the lawyer on the other side was Randy Kinnard. And I had been doing some depositions and involved in the litigation, and the case settled before trial with our client. And when that case was over, I got a call from Randy Kinnard one afternoon.
Just back up, tell us a little bit about Randy, his background.
So Randy is he was in the military, went to Hillsborough High School and the West Point, went to Vietnam, and had a couple of tours over there, came back, went to the University of Memphis School of Law, came back here and started his own practice, representing plaintiffs, with sort of I think Randy would tell you, I would have taken virtually any legitimate case back in the day. I mean, it had to be a good case and a legitimate case, but it didn't have to be worth a ton of money. But he developed sort of a niche in medical negligence, among other things, but he was well known by that because many people wouldn't do it. It was hard.
Right.
Often,
antagonize doctors and
hospitals.
Yeah, hospitals.
So he was kind of known for that. And as I say, I had this case that I had been helping Doug with, and when it was over, Randy called me one afternoon and said, Mark, would you be interested in coming over and talking to me about it? And I was honored about it initially. I think my gut feeling was, we'll have to see about this, because my wife's a doctor, my father's a doctor. And so I went and talked to my wife and my father.
Let's break off.
Yeah.
You had gotten married to Nancy
Graves,
and
her maiden name, in 1987.
I remember, I think I attended the wedding.
Yeah, you did.
West End.
Sure you did. Yeah. What's that?
Was it at West End?
No, it was at
it wasn't.
Yes, though. It was at Christ Church Cathedral downtown.
Oh, Christ Church Cathedral.
And the reception was at Richmond Country Club, and it happened to be, it was a daytime wedding. It happened to be Vanderbilt homecoming. So a lot of people came and had one drink and left. And so I've always said my father-in-law got off easy that day. But
hey, that's a thought for me. My daughter, if she ever gets married.
Consider that move.
All right. Well, anyway, so you and she's a pediatrician.
She's a pediatrician.
Is she still practicing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
She works for the Children's Clinic of Nashville.
All right. And y'all have had children and now grandchildren.
We have a total of 4 children.
Fantastic.
And obviously there's nobody whose opinion I value more than my wife's.
Yes.
And I asked her, what do you think? Randy's reached out to me. She said, well, I would go talk to him. And the other person in the medical field that I admired more than anybody in the world was my father.
Yes.
I went and talked to him, and he said, I would definitely talk to him. And there's a reason. I mean, there's a need for lawyers that represent plaintiffs in this thing. So I thought it's kind of a green light. Because there are a lot of doctors that would say, they just don't see it that way. It's either black or white.
A lot of doctors would
particularly back in that
you a betrayer.
Turncoat.
Yeah,
sort of a turncoat.
Yeah,
particularly back in that time.
Yeah,
things have gotten a little more people, and there probably is still that element. But most people, particularly doctors that I would respect, realize that there are times when there has been medical negligence, and it needs to be remedied in some way. So long story short. I went and talked to Randy, and he offered me employment, and so I went to the other side.
What year was that? Would that have been?
About 93, I want to think. Yeah.
So you were at Howell and Fisher about 3 years.
About 2.5, 3 years, I think.
All right.
And then I was with Randy up until retirement from that firm, June 30th, 2023.
All right. So
30 plus years.
And his firm eventually became, correct me if I'm wrong, Kinnard, Beveridge, and Clayton.
It was Kinnard, Clayton, and Beveridge.
Who is the Clayton?
Daniel Clayton.
Okay.
Another great guy. Great.
All right. And your office is?
We're at 127 Woodmont Boulevard, just up from Harding Road.
Right. Is that where the offices were when you joined them in 93?
Yes.
Okay.
Before that, I think they've been downtown at St. Cloud.
Yeah, I was thinking they were downtown.
Yeah. But by that time, Randy had bought the building that had formerly been owned by Northern Telecom.
Uh-huh.
And so that's where I went.
It's a
where
very
I always
nice
worked.
building. So you practiced law there for 30 years.
30 plus years.
All right. And retired just last year in 2023.
Right.
All right. Well, Mark, if you want to just recount or recall maybe 2 or 3 of the more memorable trials you had.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
let me, before you start, let me say that Mark is unusual in that he has lots of experience both as a criminal lawyer in his days as a prosecutor in the DA's office and as a civil lawyer. And that's pretty rare these days. I would say by the time most lawyers have gotten out and established themselves, they stay they stay kind of siloed, either in a criminal defense practice or district of prosecuting or some version of civil law, be it corporate or litigation or labor law or healthcare law or whatever. So, but you've been a litigator both as a criminal prosecutor and as a civil litigator.
Yeah. Boy, I'll tell you, it's there were so many criminal cases. I guess I could start there with, in General Sessions Court, there were, many memorable cases.
All right, well, we'll talk. I don't want to.
I need to kind of think about that, see if I can remember some names. I mean,
okay.
Most of the cases that I had involved people who were victims or, their family member had been, killed, raped. And most of those people were not necessarily famous people, but, I can remember, mothers of a young man who was walking home from school and was shot. And another young man who was a bank teller that was shot and killed. And both of their mothers, I got Christmas cards from for years. And there was a case named it was a fellow that was represented by Bill Purcell and Sue Ellen Weideman, who was robbing insurance companies. He knew that they had cash boxes and
just walking in with a gun right into the office.
And we were, because they'd done it a bunch of different ones, we were able to, there was enough similarity that we could try them together. And what made me think of that, and I think the fellow ended up getting convicted and getting like 170 years or something. And what made me think of that one is I remember the defendant had a gold star in his tooth, and Sue Ellen Weideman, who was one of the defense attorneys, was making that point during her closing argument to the jury that why didn't anybody in their descriptions of this person describe the person?
Your ID witnesses had omitted
they didn't say anything about the gold star. It was so prominent that they would have certainly have mentioned that if it was him. And so he's sitting there at the table with kind of a scowl on his face. And Sue Ellen says, "Lonzo, I want you to smile for the jury." And he won't. He's just kind of looking. And finally, he kind of gives a little bit of a smile, which looks so menacing. It's like, and I was like, that just didn't work. That was one of those. if the glove don't fit,
you frightened the jury, even if he did have a gold star.
So, there was.
Do you remember any other amusing moments in court, or ones that might not have seemed amusing at the time, but in how?
Oh yeah, I remember. It was frankly, almost every day in General Sessions Court, there could be something. I remember one time I was in General Sessions and there was a person who was a victim of an armed robbery. He was sitting on the chair and I was on the witness stand and I said, and I'm I've probably been there a month and I'm acting like I'm a big shot. I'm saying, "Now, do you see in this courtroom today the person that you just said did this to you? I want you to see if you can identify." "I do." Now, the defendant is sitting right in front of him.
This is probably a preliminary
hearing. It's a preliminary. Yeah. The defendant is right in front of him. This is something that should be a no-brainer. He's right in front. I said, "Do you see that person in the courtroom?" "I do." I said, "Would you please identify him?" "He's that fellow back there next to the wall." And I was like, "I don't think you understood my question." So he affirmed it again, and I was like, at that point, I was like, "Judge, may I approach the bench?" And somehow, I I don't know what I did to finally get that bound over, but there were always, there was
Every attorney's had that.
yeah, there was there were identical triplets, Franklin Delano and Roosevelt Rutledge.
Oh my gosh.
Who often got,
3 different persons each.
yeah, but you could tell when they were born, who was president at the time.
Right.
One's named Franklin, one of them named Delano, one goes, but they were identical. And police officers had a very hard time identifying which one was the perpetrator. And it was usually a DUI or public drunk or something. So, you know, little moments like that. I remember, I can remember back in the day, going to that jail docket. Just on the other side of the wall from the courtroom was a holding area where all the inmates were.
This is at the old jail
Yeah.
down on, in the Hill building
Yeah.
down there on Second
And
Avenue.
so the courtroom's here. There's another little room where the DA can meet with the victims and the lawyers and all this stuff and witnesses. And I thought, well, it'll save time if I just go on the other side and talk to the lawyer as they're talking to their clients at the bars. It'll move things along. So I was going out there to make some offers. And one time I'm doing that. I hadn't done this very long. And this guy who I had opposed a bond setting is in that big holding cell. He was a big, heavy-set fellow. And he's carrying a cane, and he comes up to the jail cell and he sticks the cane out through the bars, and he goes, boom, 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 in front of, not just in front of me, but a whole jail full of inmates. And everybody starts laughing. And I'm sort of acting like didn't bother me, but I couldn't help but have my face probably get red. And I thought, once I get out of this, I ain't coming back in here again.
So you were actually negotiating with the public defenders.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say
inside of their clients back there.
Well, it was just easier because they're out there, and I thought I'll come out here and talk to them.
They can turn right around and talk to
and
their clients.
I stopped that practice after that release.
I never did that.
But
Maybe
there were
once.
of amusing moments. I remember in criminal court in Division I, one of the lawyers that sort of floated around was a guy named Richard Fisher, who had been the district attorney in Cleveland, Tennessee. And he was a really accomplished trial lawyer, great guy.
Tom Shriver hired him, just as an aside, Tom Shriver hired him soon after he had been defeated in his reelection bid for district attorney in Cleveland.
Well, he was a great trial lawyer,
Yes,
very personable, and a bit of a gunslinger.
Yes.
And he would set cases and you know, he'd just go try them.
He'd help, or he would help you try one. If you were worried, he'd help you try that case. When's it set? Monday. Oh, no problem. Yeah.
Well, here's one. He had a rape case that he had set in Division I starting on Monday, and he calls me on Sunday afternoon, maybe Sunday evening. He said, Mark, I'm down here in Memphis where my son-in-law lives. He's a dentist, and he's going to do some dental work on my mouth. But he couldn't get to me on Friday, so I'm going to have to stick around to Monday. He's going to see me first thing, and then I'll be on up there. So do you mind going on and picking the jury in my rape case? And I was like, okay, sure, I'll do it.
You knew nothing about that.
Oh, I didn't know anything about it. So I get to work early, get the blue file that's got, the names of the witnesses, police reports, some facts and such, and study that maybe 45 minutes before court, show up at 9. And I forgot, I guess I don't know if it was Shriver or Sterling we were trying to case it up. But at any rate, I start picking the jury. We pick a jury. Now it's time to call the first witness, time to do an opening statement. So I do the opening statement.
No sign of Richard.
Look, no Richard. I call the first witness. And
this is maybe the victim of the rape?
Oh yeah, probably. Maybe the officer, but at any rate, Richard actually never showed up. We tried it. He may have come back up maybe Tuesday morning. I said, Richard, I think I got it under control now. We're way too far down the road. You haven't even been, So at any rate, I finished the trial.
You tried it by yourself.
Oh yeah. And got a conviction, which I was sort of proud of since I didn't know anything about it to begin with. But, so that was just an example of a moment in criminal law.
I must say, I can't wait to tell this story to some of the young DAs here, that you actually got a rape verdict with no knowledge of the case till you got into court. Anyway,
Well, it was,
It-
I mean, it was a
it-
good case, obviously,
Yeah.
but, you know, that was sort of kind of the old style, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. They had so many cases pending, that you'd
Yes.
set multiple cases and,
Yeah.
be ready to try whatever
Well,
came down the pipe.
I would say there was much more of a trial mentality among the judges back then, kind of a culture of, look, we're here to try cases. Every Monday, we'll try one, and if we get finished with it time enough, we'll start another one at midweek. It was not unheard of to have two jury trials in the same courtroom in the same week. That's unheard of.
Yeah, they had a backlog of cases,
Yes.
and so they didn't want to have something come in and settle it. Now we're not using the jury,
Yeah.
so you set multiple cases and you tried them.
Right.
So another, you know, speaking of humorous, I remember I had a case where I tried a guy who had been an all-star wrestler, actually an all-star wrestling promoter, and he had defrauded somebody. He had rented an airplane for his two wrestlers and then didn't pay the bill.
Mm.
And for whatever reason, we ended up trying the case. But it was live studio wrestling kind of
Oh,
promoter. And he was on, he took the stand. No, one of his wrestlers took the stand. It was one of my witnesses to say, yeah, we did rent the plane. I was on that plane. And he was the guy that rented it. And I called him as a witness. And I remember the jury was there. And at my last question, I said, I got one more question for you. And he said, what's that? I said, you're a wrestler, right? Yes, I'm a wrestler. I said, so here's my question. You realize you're under oath? Yes, sir. I said, is that real? Is what you all are doing is real? Now, you know you're under oath. And the jury started laughing. And I forgot what he said. He sort of gave some kind of half truth.
Right.
But,
Yeah, well.
so it was an interesting life to be a
Yes.
lawyer.
What about in your days practicing medical negligence? Any memorable trials or?
Many, I mean, again, representing people who have been hurt. You know, I probably, you know, I remember the first one I tried was in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Huh.
And it was a man who had an aortic dissection that wasn't timely diagnosed, and he ended up dying. And so the trial was against sort of a large clinic up there. It was called the Graves Gilbert Clinic, and the doctors there. And it was a challenging case because the jury had a number of people who were on the jury who were patients of the Graves Gilbert Clinic. And I couldn't get them off with a challenge for cause. The judge wasn't going to let me do that because they said they could be fair and impartial. And I didn't have enough peremptory challenges to get them off. So, and others that had. So I actually tried it with a couple of patients there. And it was my first ever jury trial of a medical negligence. And I got a verdict there, and a good verdict. In fact, the judge told me it was the largest verdict they had in Bowling Green up to that point.
Well, don't be shy.
Not that it was, I don't even
You don't know
remember.
the
It was not as much as what you read now.
Okay.
And it was less than $1 million, let's put it that way. But, and the lawyers on the other side, really nice men. And so, you know, I could sit down, and if you gave me more time, I could probably think of the names of cases. There's a case that Tom Thurman and I had, a fella who killed a fella coming out of a bar. And we tried it the first time. It was tried. I think Joe Binkley and Lionel Bear and Ed Yarborough represented him, and they did a great job. And the jury came back and convicted him in 15 minutes of first-degree murder. And they had done all that could be done for him.
Yeah.
And it's tried before Sterling
Gray.
And he ended up granting a new trial. And this time he had hired a lawyer from Memphis who had a Johnny suit and rings on his fingers. And Walter Kurtz tried it this time.
Like Judge Gray had set the verdict aside, the first degree
Had a new
verdict
trial.
aside, on what ground, do you remember?
I can't remember the facts. It was a
Seems-
motion for a new trial was filed and it was granted.
Which
and,
is highly unusual, by the way.
well, but it does happen. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying, you know, whether it was improper or not,
Mhm.
but I'm just, I guess I'm making the point that it's one of the cases that I tried twice, and this time, while the first time was first degree murder after 15 minutes with the best lawyers in Nashville defending.
Mhm.
The next time I have a lawyer that, you know, you wouldn't think was the best lawyer around, from Memphis, although he must have done a heck of a job. He objected to everything we ever did. And, after 2 days, they convicted of manslaughter. So it just shows you how, you know, you never quite know what a
Right.
jury's going to do. That
You can try the same case to two different juries and
You
one
just-
jury
you never know.
render a totally different verdict.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
So, in terms of other cases, I mean, I really remember a lot of the cases that got settled to in medical negligence
Yeah.
cases and,
But only after a lot of probably
Oh, my gosh.
discovery depositions and negotiations and so.
but you know, I lost a fair amount of cases in medical negligence and had wins and, you know, won a fair amount. But frankly, a lot of the good cases ended up getting resolved
Mhm.
because the insurance company realizes we got to pay and we got, you know, did good work for them.
Well, you've had a tremendous career as a lawyer, Mark, and you retired in last year in 2023.
Well,
But
I still have my law license.
I know you still and have used it, are using it now as a judge in Belle Meade. Is that
City
right?
judge for the
Talk
city of Belle
about
Meade.
Talk about what you do
Been
there.
doing that since 2015. It's mainly traffic court with some codes violations and, you know, I think we meet 2 or 3 times a month. It doesn't last a long time. I enjoy it very much. It's fun to be back in court and, that too is interesting.
There is just those trials or proceedings are in the Belle Meade City Hall.
That's
building
right. That's right.
On Harding Road.
And often, you know, there'll be people that
Who
I
you know.
know or know their family.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, when whoever it is that comes in, nobody in the court would know that I know him. I said, if you had a case, I would say, Mr. DeWitt, how do you plead? And, you know, would treat you just like anybody else. And I wouldn't say, oh, Paul, how you doing? It's good to see you again. Because that sort of feeds the impression that maybe some people already have that it's who you know down here and Belle Meade takes care of their own. So I call everybody the same, treat everybody the same way and show any recognition of anybody.
Well,
and it's fun. Every day there's something new. I had a case, a couple of months ago of a fella who was I think his name was Felix Cavalier. He had a minor traffic offense and I knew the name. He was the lead singer.
The Rascals.
For the Rascals.
Yes,
And I bought his album at
yes.
Mills Bookstore when I was like a 6th grader. Good Lovin'.
Oh, yeah.
And here he is in my court. And I saw the document before, Felix Cavalieri. And I thought, wow, could it be the same
Well,
guy?
when you said that name, I thought, isn't that the guy who was the lead singer of the
Nice man,
Rascals?
very nice man. He
Yeah.
had a small traffic
Does he live in
citation,
Nashville or
I
does
guess
he
he
visit?
does. But
Oh.
he had one and I came in and I said, I called, we called his name. I said, are you in the music business? And he said, yeah. I said, are you still? I said, ladies and gentlemen, we have an
Probably
icon.
nobody
We
else.
have an icon in our midst. And it's mostly young
Yes.
people. And I told them, you heard a good loving, grooving, always
Beautiful morning.
beautiful morning. And everybody's going, yeah, that was this man.
Yeah.
And, of course, I had to find him guilty though.
Oh.
So, and let him go to traffic school.
Well, that must be a really interesting
Well, it's fun.
offshoot of your career as a lawyer.
The other
And
thing
you're-
I'm doing now is mediating. And
Okay.
so I
Yeah.
do a lot of mediation for the Nashville Conflict Resolution Center, pro bono down in General Sessions Court, which is a little bit like, coming back to where I started.
Uh-huh.
And I'm enjoying it very much. It's
Small
very
claims
gratifying.
type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of landlord tenant,
Yeah.
all small claims, but to these people, they're big problems.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's,
How often do you do that?
oh, I'd say once every 2 weeks or so.
Oh.
I sign up for it, and when I'm free, I do it. And right now, I'm trying to do it about every week or 2 weeks. And again, it's about half a day, gets me back down to court, and I'm helping people.
Well,
and it's fun.
it's a tremendous use. A lot of lawyers and other professionals, once they retire from their main gig, they just kind of totally set all that behind them, but not use. So thank you for your service.
Well, I'm enjoying it, and it's
Yeah.
fun.
You have served on the Nashville Bar Association Board of Directors twice,
2 terms, yeah.
and you belong to any other civic organizations or?
Oh, well, obviously, well, it's not civic, but Tennessee
Civic.
Trial Lawyers. I used to, longtime member of the Tennessee Bar Association. I was on the Board of Governors of the Trial Lawyers. In terms of, I was president of the Exchange Club of Nashville, now the Economic Club of Nashville, Antiques and Garden Show board president. Those are the prominent things. I'm involved in my church.
You've served as an elder at Westminster Presbyterian
Right,
Church.
yeah.
Yes. I frequently lead the liturgy.
I'm the
You are-
liturgist. I got on the
Yes.
list, and they don't, once you're on the list, you don't
You
get
don't
off
ever
the
get
list.
off.
So I do that 2 or 3 times a year. I
All
used to
right.
teach Sunday school to young people.
Yes.
Kids were young.
Let me ask you, are there any more accomplishments that you would like to achieve?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. I feel like in the legal, part of the reason I retired, I just turned 70. And I loved what I was doing, but I was ready to see what else was out there. And as you know, when you're a trial lawyer and you have cases and clients, you're pretty much working all the time for them. And there's not, at least for me,
Yes.
I'm not one of these guys that can wing it. And so, if I had a trial, it's there all weekend. And even if I didn't have a trial, preparing for depositions, it's an all day.
It's a time
Every day.
consuming.
So there wasn't a lot of time for other things that I kind of
Right.
wanted to be doing, like, now I'm taking a disciple class at my church.
Yes.
And I've got 6 grandchildren, 4 of whom live here now, and I'm spending time with them. My wife and I like to travel, and it was pretty hard to travel when both
Yes.
are professionals. And when I would get some time, she, well, I got to see patients that day, and or vice versa. She'd say, I'm gonna be off. Well, I've got to work that day. So it's a little easy for us to travel.
Where are some of the places you and your wife have visited?
Every trip really that we ever took when our children were younger was a family trip, to be honest with you. But now that they're grown through college, let's see, we've been to France, we went to Normandy, we've been to Italy twice, northern part of Italy, and then the southern part of Italy, in Capri. Been to Spain and Portugal, been to Ireland,
Terrific.
been to Scotland. So making up for lost time.
And you have some other destinations?
Oh, yeah. New Zealand's pretty fabulous.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to see the Holy Land someday.
Yeah.
Particularly once I feel like it's maybe a little safer over there. The Galapagos. I mean, there's all.
And your health is good. I believe
My health is good.
Keep active in sport. I remember you were a good golfer and tennis player. Still pursue those?
The good part might have waxed away a little bit, but I'm still playing more golf. You would think playing more golf, my game would be getting better and my handicap would be dropping, but I haven't found that to be the case so far.
Well, I remember playing golf with you once or twice, and you were a really good player and hit the ball a long way.
I still like it. I'm still playing tennis.
Yeah.
When I was in the DA's office, my partner in the Metro tennis tournament was a guy named Walter Overton, a great guy. He was a great athlete.
Yes, star football player at Vanderbilt and before that Pearl High School. Yes.
And he and I were friends. He was Judge White's court officer, and we signed up for the Metro Tennis Tournament and won it one year. And I've got a picture somewhere
Quite a
of
feat.
Dick Fulton giving us a trophy
Oh, yeah.
somewhere. And and then I would always play in the Bar Association golf
Golf
tournament, which was
tournament,
fun.
yes, they used to have that at, I think at either Richland or Woodmont country clubs, or maybe
Yep.
both if there is.
One year we won that, my team.
Yeah,
Who can forget the DA's office softball team?
yes.
And that I know you played on.
I was the coach for the first 5 or so years of its existence.
Mhm.
And then I was sort of unofficially relieved of my duties and stayed away from
Oh.
it for 25 years. And then one day Glenn Funk asked me to start the team back up, which I did, and have been coaching it for the last 9 years. And we've won actually 2 championships.
Well, that was great.
But yeah, you were our shortstop.
I
Yes.
loved it, and it
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. I can remember though that I for whatever reason I was playing in shorts, and back then shorts
Yeah.
were shorter. And
Yes,
I
they
remember
were.
the last game of the season one year, I slid into third base in those shorts, and I got the biggest strawberry on
Yes.
my thigh that for the rest of the summer kind of oozed.
Oh,
And I had to change the bandages all the time. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm not playing long base.
yeah, but once you were competitive. I mean, once you were out there on the field, you
Didn't even
think
beat it,
about-
but
yeah.
I wasn't gonna get thrown out
Yeah,
at third.
right.
And that
That's
was,
right.
but those were fun days.
Well, Mark, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been a terrific interview, and thank you for your service
Yeah.
as a lawyer here in Nashville for
Yeah.
over 40 years. I do want to ask you one last question. What accomplishment or what thing in your career as an attorney are you most proud of?
I would say, lawyers are, of course, everybody wants their life to be useful and meaningful and be, good to your family and, the people, your loved ones, people in your community, your friends, your church. Lawyers are kind of lucky to have a job where they actually get to serve people, It's not the only profession, but it certainly is one where serving others. And so, I feel gratified that I've gotten to do that and specifically helping people who've been hurt. I mean, victims, whether it was people or families of victims of, a criminal act
Yes.
or victims of, of professional negligence or
Yes.
ordinary negligence. And so I guess that's kind of been the common theme of what I've done
Wow.
always is trying to help people who might otherwise not have been hurt and
Yes.
try to make things right, get justice,
Yes.
So, that feels good. And I don't know that it's my DA job, probably I just sort of backed into, but that's kind of the way my career has been. And so I feel good
Well,
that I had that
as well,
opportunity.
you should, and you should be very proud of your years of service. And just, I'll ask you, you probably have re-encountered or met some victims or families of victims many years later.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, that's
every once in a while,
extremely
somebody will come up to you or they'll say, I was on your jury.
Yeah.
And so it's always good to remember. Speaking of, you mentioned earlier who's been sort of a mentor, important person to me. And I mentioned the lawyers and I want to go back to Randall White.
Okay.
Who, he and I
Wonderful man.
remained friends and see each other from time to time. He is one of the nicest gentlemen that I've ever known.
Yes.
And right up there with Henry Goodpasture. I mean, he was FBI, Marine, police officer, assistant DA, judge, and probably one of the first judges that I ever had. And he always treated me well, and he treated the people that came before him well. And he's an example to emulate too.
Yes,
Even
he
now,
is.
in-
Oh,
in
yes.
his older
And
age.
his, well, I just remember how patient he was with a young, totally inexperienced assistant DA who's sitting here right now in this chair,
And
making
here-
mistakes and not knowing what to do, and how patient he was. And by the way, Judge Wyatt's son, Vince, is currently an assistant DA.
I knew that.
Does a terrific job. He and I have gotten to be good friends. He is the pitcher of our championship softball.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
It
Randall,
takes right after his dad, just
All right.
in many ways, just. a
Randall, and I
wonderful-
always have called him Judge Wyatt.
Yeah.
I don't call him Randall.
Of course,
But,
yeah.
just, he's another lawyer who is a gentleman and just a good human being
Yeah.
that is the best of our profession. And there are a lot of examples like that. But I didn't mention him earlier. And I
Well,
wanted to
thanks for
circle back
mentioning
to
him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Mark, it's been great. Thank you
Paul.
so much.
Enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I'm honored to have y'all want to hear from me a
Oh,
little bit.
absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, staff of the Nashville Bar Office. Okay.